The 2010s decade was a very interesting decade, for lack of better words. The 2010s decade awoke me. The 2010s decade made me realize who I am, who I truly am as a black man. The 2010s decade made me a man. The 2010s decade was very rough on me. I'm sure it was very rough on millions of American black men across the country. The 2010s decade was definitely a wake-up call for me. After I graduated high school in 2012, then I got into the real world. After I graduated high school, I got into the real world, and that's when I really found out what being an American black man is really about. It caught me off guard because when you're just a teenager, you're not experiencing racism like that. So you're not really mentally prepared for it yet. You're just a kid coming straight out of the high school. You're not expected to be treated a certain way. You're not used to the harshness of the world, especially as a black man. Black men, you realize once you graduate from high school, you get into the real world, as a black man, you truly realize what it is to be a black man. Black men, we have it rough. We have a unique experience that no one else in the fucking world really knows about. The racism in the 2010s decade should be historically documented, put into books, taught in schools. Yes, that decade was that hectic. That decade was that evil. And it cannot be ignored, Black men, we need to come together and find a way to put down our experiences of the 2010s decade, like in a book or in a documentary, so the whole world can know our experiences, so people can learn from it. So young black men coming up, young black kids coming up, can prepare for the harsh world of racism before they become an adult. Because if I knew what black men go through as adults, if I knew 100% before I experienced it, I could have been more prepared for it. And preparation is always good because if you prepare for something, you have an easier time going through that specific experience. It won't be as traumatic on you. And trauma, mental and psychological trauma, that can affect your life in many ways. If I did not have the anger, the subconscious trauma in me due to my negative experiences with racism in the 2010s decade, 100% without a doubt, I would have been way further in life. And when I was going through what I was going through in the 2010s decade with racism, just the crazy experiences that Black men go through, I did not fully know what was going on. I knew what I was going through was correlated with me being a Black man. But now I know it was much deeper than just mere skin tone. It was much deeper than just me having black skin. I was battling Satan in the 2010s decade. I was battling a society of Satan in the 2010s decade. Why was Satan so much against me in the 2010s decade? Why was Satan so against me? And why were demonic entities so against me, so much against me in the 2010s decade? I asked myself that question. And it's because I'm one of God's people. I'm one of God's chosen people. And if you're one of God's chosen people, Satan sees you as his enemy and wants to attack you. And when I mean God's chosen people, I mean a Hebrew, an Israelite man. Satan hates the Israelites, God's chosen people. And before I even knew I was a Hebrew, an Israelite, Satan knew. Before I knew I was an Israelite, Satan knew that I was an Israelite. And that's why he was attacking me in the 2010s decade, relentlessly. I was homeless several times in the 2010s decade. I could not succeed with any woman in the 2010s decade. And those are some fucking hardships. Then I was having a lot of workplace issues in the 2010s decade. Funny experiences with people in the 2010s decade. And man, I didn't know what was going on when I was going through it. I knew it was racism. I knew it had to do with me being a black man. Why are these females acting so funny towards me? You telling me I was never no bad looking dude? I'm not no bad looking guy. So why can't I get a female? And that's because these women in this society, they're on Satan's side. They're on Satan's team to oppress the man of Israel, God's chosen man. If you're an elect of Israel, these women hate your black ass. They oppose your black ass. Because Satan is operating through these low frequency women. Satan and demonic entities, demonic spirits. In the 2010s decade, especially, Satan and the demonic entities were acting through women to oppress the elect man of Israel. They were. They definitely were. Satan and his demons they want to oppress the man of Israel, God's chosen man, in any way possible. And Satan and his demonic spirits can use people as vessels to get his mission accomplished, to tear down the man of Israel, God's chosen man. The shit I used to experience in the 2010s decade was weird as shit with women. It was like, you have to understand, women, they're naturally at a lower frequency. So they're more susceptible to be used as vessels by Satan and his demons, since they're at a naturally lower frequency. Weird ass shit I used to go experience with women, like in passing. Women would see me, they'll start running away, making nasty faces at me. Women, they just wouldn't give me the time of day. They would reject me. And I was never no lame motherfucker. I was never no bad looking dude. Anything like that. With my experiences with women in the 2010s decade, you would have thought I was some ugly, fat motherfucker, lame as shit, Steve Urkel lame. No, I'm not that type of dude. That's why I always knew. I mean, I didn't always know, but I always knew it was something deeper. I didn't know exactly what it was when I was going through it, but I knew it was something deeper. I didn't know in the 2010s decade it was because I was a Hebrew. You know, I didn't really find out who I was. I didn't start beginning to find out I was a Hebrew until like the end of the 2010s decade, like the end of 2018 and in 2019. That was right at the end of the decade. Women did not like me. I have funny experiences with women, negative experiences with women. And I was never no bad looking dude. I'm not saying I wasn't no dirty motherfucker, you feel me? I'm not saying that I didn't have any areas in which I could have improved on, but for the most part, man, I was like, I'm not perfect or anything, but you know what I mean. This shit was Satan. This shit is Satan, satanic. Back in the 2010s decade, I always used to be thinking, it's because I'm a black man. It's because I'm a black man. That's part of it, but it's way deeper than just me being a black man. Because I know other people who are black men. I had friends, homies who are black men, and they were not experiencing the same weird shit that I was experiencing. So I always knew it was deeper than just me being a black man. But back when I was experiencing it, I was thinking, oh, it's I'm a black man just because I'm a black man, which is part of it, but it's deeper than that. It's way deeper than that. It's who I am spiritually as a black man, a Hebrew man, God's chosen man. So there's a spirit. It was a spiritual war in the 2010s decade. It's still going on today, but it's not as bad as the 2010s decade. Especially in 2017 to 2021. That's when the fucking spiritual war against the Hebrew man was at a fucking all-time level. And yeah, man, now that I look back on it, it was an extreme spiritual war in the 2010s decade. That shit was extreme. Now that I look back on it, just like that. In my city, at one point, like you could just feel the racism against you as a black man in the fucking atmosphere. People didn't even need to speak to you or anything. You could just feel the opposition against you as a Hebrew man in the atmosphere. That's how bad it was. The spiritual war was at an all-time high. And what was so special about the 2010s decade, like, why did it have to be the 2010s decade? Why could it not have been in the not? Why was the spiritual war so high against black men in the 2010s decade? Not in the 2000s decade, not in the 90s decade. What was so special about the 2010s decade? Now I know. Now I know the answer to that question. The spiritual war against the Hebrew man, God's chosen man, was so at an all-time high level in the 2010s decade because the 2010s decade It's the decade right before the age of tribulation. The 2010s decade is a decade right before the elect of Israel enter into the earthly kingdom of heaven. And Satan knows that you're an elect of Israel and you're going to be in the kingdom of heaven. So he only has a small time to try to fuck with you and tear you down. Because he knew before you knew. Satan knew before you even knew who you were, who you were destined to be. So he used the 2010s decade to get at you, to try to tear you down, to try to knock you down. Ain't that some powerful shit, man? You're so much of a special man as an elect Hebrew man that Satan had to use a whole society, a full decade, and a whole society to team up against you, to tear you down. Ain't that some shit? Back when I was experiencing this shit, man, I'm 18, 19 years old, 20, 21 years old. And all I'm knowing is that, oh, this shit's because I'm a black man. The shit that I used to go through, the isolation, not being able to get women, people acting funny towards me, trying to tear me down, treating me like I'm less than, treating me like I'm stupid, like I'm unintelligent, like I'm incompetent. That shit used to fucking bug my black ass out. I did not know how to handle it. It used to just make me extremely angry. I used to just ponder on my negative experiences 24/7, 24 fucking 7. I did not know what was going on. Truly, I knew it was partially because I'm a black man. My experiences got to be so negative that I made a blog, detailing my experiences as a black man. Laying out my anger as a black man. I made a literal blog where I made several, probably over 100 blog posts about shit that black men would go through on a daily basis. That was back in 2015. I made that blog. In 2016, I was making regular blog posts about the black male plight. But there was a good thing about the 2010s decade because the Most High, He allowed me to go through all those hardships in the 2010s decade so I can realize who I truly am. If it wasn't for all that bullshit I went through in the 2010s decade, I would not have found out that I am a Hebrew man. All that shit that I went through in the 2010s decade, that pushed me to realize that, hey, maybe we are God's chosen people as a black man, as black people. Why do it put a question, all that bullshit that I was going through in the 2010s decade, it put a question in my head. Like, why am I experiencing all these hardships as a black man? Why are all these women acting funny towards me as a black man? Maybe we are God's chosen people. Then, in 2018, I started watching videos about the curses of Deuteronomy. And it all made sense. Like, oh shit, black people, we are God's chosen people. That's why we are under the curses of Israel. That's why I'm under this damn attack in that 2010s decade. And if it wasn't for the 2010s decade, the hardships that I was going through, I would not have put in the work to research certain things that led me to know that I am a Hebrew Israelite. So I had to go through that. I had to go through all those hardships, to get to where I am now, of having a lot of knowledge of who I am as a Hebrew. Ain't that some shit? But at the same time, man, I look back in the 20th decade, I reminisce. That decade was special. It was negative, but it was special at the same time because it built me to be a man. I've been through so much in that 20th decade. I was homeless a few times in that decade. I couldn't get no female. I was angry with my experiences with racism. I was experiencing some weird ass shit, man. It was like, wow. I was under complete attack. And I did not know what was going on when it was happening. But now that I look back on it, okay, I was in a spiritual war. It was a spiritual war against me. That decade was special. That decade, man, it was so crazy in that decade, man. Especially from 2012 to 2021. Man, there was some shit that was happening, man. Spiritual war against the Hebrew, man. And I can't even, now that I look back on that decade, like I can't even fully describe it. It's like an aura, an energy that's tied to that decade. Now that I reminisce on it and think back on it, that I can't even describe with words. I just know that, man, I was like, and certain things people said to me in that decade, certain ways people treated me in that decade, in 2010s decade. Now that I look back on it, I know Satan was using people around me as vessels to get to me, to tear me down, to tear my spirit down, to make me think less of myself. Man, like, it was some deep shit. But all right, you guys, peace.